The story is set in 16th century France. Michael Kohlhaas is a horse trader. On this day, Kolhas is preparing to go to the city to sell horses. These horses are carefully bred and are worth a lot of money. However, when he is about to pass through a necessary route, he finds that a roadblock has been set up there. It turns out that the old baron who managed this land has died, and his son, upon becoming the new baron, demands that all passers-by present a pass to pass through. Kolhas is very dissatisfied with this. He has been using this road for many years, so why should he have to pay for a pass today? At this time, the baron is watching everyone from the side. He is holding a pistol in his hand, trying to use it to threaten Kolhas. After negotiations, the baron's men demand that Kolhas leave 2 horses as collateral and that he can only retrieve them after obtaining a pass. Reluctantly, Kolhas agrees. He instructs his servant Cesar to follow and take good care of the 2 detained horses. After Kolhas leaves, Cesar goes to the baron's residence to look after the horses as requested by Kolhas. But to his anger, the baron's men use the 2 horses for heavy labor without permission, soon causing them to be covered in wounds. After rescuing the horses, Cesar takes them to the riverside for cleaning. Soon, the baron's men arrive with weapons. Not only do they take back the horses, but they also set dogs on Cesar, injuring him. On the other side, Kolhas takes the other horses to the city and sells them. Because of his excellent horse breeding skills and his honest business practices, the manager greatly admires him. After selling the horses, Kolhas returns home. In the evening, he and his young assistant Jeremy read the French Bible together. From their conversation, we learn that Kolhas is a devout Christian and has his own views on religious philosophy. The next day, Kolhas returns home. His wife Judith warmly welcomes him. Kolhas and his wife have a daughter named Lisbeth. Their family is well off and lives a happy life. After a short rest, Kolhas takes the pass and prepares to go to the baron to retrieve the 2 black horses. However, when he arrives at the stable, he finds that his horses have been so badly abused that they are unrecognizable. Angrily, Kolhas demands an explanation from the baron's servants. The servants explain that they needed to pay for the horses' upkeep, so they let the horses work. They also claim that Kolhas's servant Cesar has escaped because he tried to steal the horses, but was caught by the baron's men. Kolhas doesn't believe this at all. Cesar had previously been a soldier and was loyal to him, so how could he have run away? Kolhas stopped the baron on his way back to the castle. He demanded that the baron restore the 2 horses to their original condition and reminded him that the Princess of France had already prohibited local lords from charging tolls. If the baron didn't comply, Kolhas would take him to court. However, the baron seemed unafraid of Kolhas. He didn't respond and arrogantly walked into his house. Soon after, Kolhas found Cesar and brought him to see the lawyer, hoping the lawyer could help him with the lawsuit. Kolhas demanded compensation from the baron for the losses he and Cesar had suffered, the cessation of the tolls, and the return of the 2 black horses in healthy and beautiful condition. After receiving the lawyer's promise, Kolhas returned home, believing that the local court would grant him justice. While waiting, Kolhas helped a mare in his stable give birth. Seeing the newborn foal struggle to stand up, the family felt the tenacity and fighting spirit of life. However, bad news soon arrived. Because the baron was a relative of the judge, the court ruled against Kolhas and prohibited him from appealing further, threatening him with punishment if he did. But the baron had to return the horses to Kolhas. Kolhas was extremely angry about this result. The lawyer quickly advised Kolhas, saying, "Can't you bear such a small loss? Hurry and get the horses back from the baron and stop causing trouble." After the lawyer left, Kolhas remained upset for a long time. If he tolerated this today, the baron would only become more unscrupulous in bullying him tomorrow. After careful consideration, Kolhas decided to take his case to the princess. To do this, he was willing to sell his land and house in exchange for a fair judgment. The princess referred to here is Marguerite of Angoulême, the Queen of Navarre and sister of King Francis I of France. Kolhas lived in her jurisdiction. Hearing about this plan, his wife Judith was very worried. She didn't want Kolhas to sell their property and didn't believe that his rash actions would earn the princess's sympathy. After discussing it, Judith decided to meet the princess on behalf of her husband, thinking she might handle the matter more gently and effectively. However, before she could meet the princess, she was attacked by the baron's men and was brought back home covered in blood. Seeing Judith's miserable and tragic death, Kolhas and his daughter were heartbroken. It was clear that reasonable resistance was meaningless, in a world where the nobility arbitrarily oppressed the poor. Only declaring war on them could earn true dignity. After deciding to launch an armed uprising, Kolhas asked the preacher to take his daughter away temporarily. Once the situation stabilized, Kolhas would bring her back, sending his daughter away. Kolhas immediately organized his rebel force. They donned their armor, took up weapons, and swore to confront the baron. Thus, Kolhas began his road to revenge. Early in the morning, Kolhas and his men quietly arrived at the outskirts of the baron's castle. Due to the baron's usual lax security, Kolhas successfully broke in. After a fierce battle, Nearly all the men were killed, leaving only women and children alive. But the Baron himself was not at home. Reluctantly, Kolhas and his men had to continue their pursuit. Over time, news of Kolhas's deeds spread throughout France. Many poor people admired his courage to fight against fate and joined his ranks. The uprising army grew steadily, but Kolhas was careful not to blindly recruit anyone. He knew that peasants who dared to resist the lords often faced brutal torture. He didn't want to accept those who were not steadfast or capable of fighting, to avoid them suffering tragic fates. By chance, Kolhas learned that the Baron was hiding in a monastery, so he immediately led his army to pursue him. Upon reaching the monastery, Kolhas ordered his soldiers to ignite their arrows, using fire to announce their arrival. However, considering it was a religious site mainly inhabited by nuns, Kolhas did not storm the monastery. Realizing his location was exposed, the Baron decided to escape. He planned to disguise himself as an ordinary peasant and flee with the help of reinforcements. Soon, the manager arrived with troops to protect the Baron. Through his conversations with those around him, we learned that the manager's father died in a peasant uprising. At that time, his family's 3 estates were also destroyed. It was the inherent disdain for the poor that caused such results. Meanwhile, under the preacher's escort, Kolhas's daughter Lisbeth returned to her father. During their conversation, the preacher mentioned that Kolhas's actions did not provoke resentment back home. The neighbors did not seize the opportunity to take over Kolhas's land and house but were instead taking care of them. However, the preacher himself did not want to get involved and planned to return home. As for his daughter, Kolhas decided to keep her by his side. Soon, Kolhas learned that the Baron had left the monastery, so he immediately led his army in pursuit. Seeing the mutual slaughter, his daughter asked, "Are you fighting for mother?" Kolhas replied, "No." She then asked, "Is it for the horses?" Kolhas again replied, "No." At this moment, Lisbeth could not fully understand the concept of dignity. After the battle, all the soldiers escorting the Baron were wiped out, but Kolhas's most loyal friend, Caesar, also tragically fell. However, Kolhas did not find the manager and the Baron in this raid, as they had not been with the soldiers but had quietly escaped in disguise. The 2 squads defeated by the uprising army were merely providing cover for their escape. Afterward, Kolhas continued his pursuit of the Baron. During this period, the uprising army attacked numerous towns, punishing the nobles who oppressed the common people in the harshest ways. In reality, many innocent nobles were also implicated. Soon, Kolhas's reputation spread throughout France, shocking the nation. Faced with the increasingly powerful uprising army, even the royal family was troubled. Unlike many peasant uprising forces, Kolhas led a disciplined team. He believed that forcibly demanding money was something only lords would do, so he ordered his army not to take anything and to repay all debts, so as not to betray the uprising's original intent. To prevent his soldiers from looting the poor, Kolhas would severely punish those who violated military orders, even executing them. After one such execution, a theologian in the crowd raised objections. He questioned Kolhas, "Is this your idea of justice? Hanging your own men, burning towns, slaughtering nobles, and leading a bunch of peasants into a war that has nothing to do with them? You are a wealthy merchant with a thriving business compared to others. Your life is not hard, so what effort have you made to obtain justice? And is the justice you pursue still considered justice?" Faced with the theologian's accusations, Kolhas did not get angry because he knew the theologian. The French Bible he usually read was translated by him. Later, Kolhas entertained the theologian. Taking this opportunity, the theologian advised that if everyone were like Kolhas, the world would be filled with revenge, losing all order and justice. Justice cannot be pursued with swords and knives, but with obedience and humility. If Kolhas could learn to endure and bear injustice, God would surely bring him justice. According to the theologian's own logic, his words were problematic too. Who can say that Kolhas's uprising was not God's way of bringing him justice? During their conversation, the theologian made reasonable criticisms of Kolhas's violent methods, yet he stood on the side of maintaining feudal order. In the end, Kolhas listened to the theologian's words. He felt his actions contradicted his faith, and during the uprising, he indeed hurt innocent people, burdening him with a heavy conscience. He began to doubt whether his actions were truly just. Filled with pain and guilt, Kolhas shed tears. After a long talk, the devout Kolhas decided to abandon his resistance, but his compromise was not without conditions. Only if the Baron returned his 2 good horses and compensated for his actions would Kolhas cease his fight. The theologian was very dissatisfied with Kolhas's request. He had always hoped that Kolhas would unconditionally surrender, but reluctantly agreed to help Kolhas submit a petition to the princess. Soon after, Kolhas received a letter from Princess Marguerite. The princess was willing to grant Kolhas passage rights, and his case would be retried. From today onward, as long as Kolhas lays down his arms, all members of the uprising army will be pardoned. Seeing that the royal family had compromised, Kolhas was very satisfied and decided to disband the uprising army on the spot. The soldiers were very confused by Kolhas's easy surrender. They had fought for so long, only for it to end inexplicably. However, as Kolhas was the core figure of the uprising, without him, the army would be nothing but a scattered group. So everyone laid down their weapons, except for Jeremy, who did not want to surrender and left on his own. After disbanding the army, Kolhas returned home with his daughter and started living a peaceful life. One day, Princess Marguerite suddenly visited. Much to Kolhas's surprise, the princess first looked Kolhas up and down and then greeted his daughter. In fact, the princess had no hostile intentions with this visit. She knew that just before Kolhas decided to surrender, the uprising army was preparing to attack a town where she happened to be. Since she didn't have many guards with her at the time, if the uprising army had attacked, she would surely have been captured. The princess asked Kolhas why he stopped. Kolhas explained that he didn't want more. He only wanted to reclaim what was rightfully his. Impressed by Kolhas's principles, the princess promised to protect his safety and promised to reopen the case of Kolhas and the Baron. Afterward, the princess visited the grave of Kolhas's late wife to pay her respects. Seeing the princess's gestures, Kolhas felt greatly comforted. Satisfied with the outcome, Kolhas happily prepared to welcome his new life. However, soon someone brought news that a member of the uprising army had not surrendered his weapon, had robbed and killed 2 nobles to support the peasants. Despite Kolhas having distanced himself from the uprising army, the nobles, led by the Baron's family, held Kolhas responsible. The princess therefore concluded that Kolhas had violated the pardon agreement and that he would soon be arrested as a criminal. Realizing he had been framed by the nobles, Kolhas decided to flee with his daughter. Under the cover of night, they left secretly and began a life on the run. Despite the harsh conditions, his daughter followed Kolhas without complaint. However, as pursuers closed in, they were eventually captured. Hearing that she would be sent to live with her aunt and would never be able to return home, his daughter was deeply saddened. But what pained her more was the impending farewell to her father. After being imprisoned, the preacher made a special visit to see Kolhas. By this time, Kolhas had learned that, thanks to the princess's intervention, he would be spared from torture. But at this moment, what troubled Kolhas was not the death sentence, but the certainty of it, when he knew exactly when, where, and how he would be executed. When he knew he would soon be separated from his daughter and reunite with his wife's spirit in the afterlife, he truly felt fear. Shortly afterward, Kolhas faced his execution. By then, the Baron had been sentenced to return the horses to Kolhas and pay compensation. The Baron himself would serve 2 years in prison for his crimes. Only 2 years. Faced with this belated justice, Kolhas had mixed feelings. He handed all the compensation money to the preacher, asking him to aid the poor, and then awaited his beheading. In reality, this verdict was the greatest irony for Kolhas. His blind trust in the noble class resulted in meaningless fairness. Before his execution, Kolhas bid farewell to his daughter. However, his daughter was unwilling to forgive him for abandoning her. In response to his sorrowful words, she simply said she wanted to leave. Thus, Kolhas helped her onto a horse, and she quickly rode away without looking back. Perhaps she just didn't want to see her father's life taken away. Ultimately, Kolhas accepted his fate with composure. He was told that his rights had been restored, but now it was time for him to pay the price for disturbing the peace. For Kolhas, the uprising was a failure, and the verdict was disgraceful. Yet, his tragic life finally reached a resolution. Thus, the film ended. Michael Kohlhaas is adapted from the eponymous novel by German writer Heinrich von Kleist. The original story is set in Germany and is based on real historical events. Hans Kohlhaas led an uprising against the Elector of Saxony in the Holy Roman Empire. Martin Luther intervened to mediate between him and the Lord. However, due to the director's unfamiliarity with Germany, the film's setting was changed to France. Although there were differences between 16th century Germany and France in terms of politics and culture, the living conditions of the common people were quite similar. Michael Kohlhaas tells a deeply tragic story. Kolhas fought against the nobles to defend his rights and dignity, only to ultimately succumb to his intrinsic submission to feudal authority. This reflects the predicament of the lower classes in Europe at that time. They loathed exploitation but became weak under the control of the elites, which doomed their resistance to the old order to be incomplete. Overall, the film features exquisite and steady cinematography, and Mads Mikkelsen's performance as the protagonist is undeniably cool. It's rare to see a film that reflects the lives of the lower classes during the Renaissance. Moreover, if you can take the time to watch this film, you will undoubtedly feel its unique charm. That's all for today's video. I'm a film enthusiast, and welcome to subscribe to my channel. See you next time.